Rob. I'd like you to introduce you now to Ellen Howard from Lockleaze. She's on the Bristol Respect Steering Group. Ellen has a passion for the environment. She has a passion for the environment and for the community. And what is so special, I think, about Ellen is that she can inspire people. She inspires people, she gives them confidence, she tells them that they can campaign and they can win. And the one thing that we do know in Bristol, whether it's a Liberal Democrat council or a Labour council, we have won, we have made them change their policies by campaigning. Campaigning has been successful. So, Ellen.
Good evening, everyone, especially those of you who live and work here in Easton. Although I know, as Jerry said, some people have come from much further away. I live in Lockleaze, an area of Bristol quite close to here. 2 years ago, I came to a meeting very much like this one, but in Lockleaze. It was in the run-up to the local council elections. George Galloway was speaking, and so was Jerry Hicks of Rolls-Royce fame at that time, who was the local Respect candidate. I went to that meeting, I must admit, probably like some of you, more out of curiosity as much as anything, to hear George speak and see what I thought about him. I wasn't a particularly political person. I'd never joined a political party because they all seemed to make promises they didn't keep. The thing was, though, that like many of you, I'm sure, I had deep concerns about the state of the world and how it's run. And probably, like some of you, I felt helpless to do anything about it. Putting a cross on a piece of paper in a ballot box every few years didn't seem to make much difference. I'd been on the big march in London with my friends and 2 million others against the war, hopeful that we could make a difference. Surely with so many people demonstrating all over the world, the invasion of Iraq would be unthinkable. Of course it was unthinkable and criminal, but it happened anyway. That meeting in Lockleaze 2 years ago changed the course of my life. I actually came away inspired by what I heard from George and Jerry that night. Inspired enough to put my name and contact details on a piece of paper and stick it into a box, much like a ballot box, although I think it actually did more good on that night. Within 48 hours, Jerry Hicks was sitting in my house, listening to my thoughts about the injustices of the world. It took a while, there were a lot of them. It was the first time any political person really listened to what I had to say, instead of shoving what he thought down my throat. I decided to get involved to support this man of obvious integrity in his campaign to get the Respect Party on the map in Bristol. Even though Respect was less than 2 years old at that time, we came second to the sitting councillor, beating the Labour Party and Conservatives, none of whom incidentally appeared on my doorstep at any time during that election campaign. Next time we're going to do even better, aren't we, Jerry? Yes. I never dreamt that 2 years later I'd be speaking on the same platform as George Galloway, one of the men who inspired me to nail red and green colours to the mast and to speak up for the peaceful, green, socialist world that I want to live in. And let me just say a bit more about that world where I want to live. Instead of spending billions on a war based on lies, I want to see schools opening, not closing, and employing more teachers, not having jumble and car boot sales to raise money for books. It'd be a very different world, wouldn't it, if the army had to have jumble sales to go to war. Can you imagine it? You know, General so-and-so, I think we need a war in Iraq, let's have a few boot sales to raise the money. Our children now have to get into debt to pay for a university education, unless their parents are rich enough to help them out. Those in Westminster who had a free university education have now pulled the ladder up behind them so that our children have to pay. I want to see hospitals with enough nurses and doctors to give quality time to everyone in their care and for there to be no waiting lists, and I work in the NHS, by the way. I want to see a world where our pensioners have a decent standard of living instead of being afraid at the cost of keeping themselves warm and well fed in the wintertime. Yeah. A world where the age of retirement is coming down, not going up. A world where there are enough council houses for all those who cannot afford to buy, not where the council land and houses are sold off to private property developers for their profit, not least here in Bristol as well as everywhere else in the country. A world where we don't need to return to nuclear energy because we don't have the resources to invest in renewable energy, and where there will be no need for green taxes in the form of tolls on motorways, rising fares and fuel costs, rather than investing in cheap, efficient public transport. A world where our environment and all its people and creatures are treated with respect. We're all doing our bit, whether it's recycling, composting, reusing carrier bags, or maybe becoming veggie or vegan like myself. And walking wherever we can, whilst big industry, which is responsible for most of the pollution in our world, has had its corporation tax reduced. A world in which we keep our hard-won civil liberties that are only being eroded because of a terrorist threat which has only increased because of our part in an illegal war in Iraq. We are the most watched people in the world, and under a Labour government, more and more people, many of them young people, are being criminalised. Most of all, I want to see a world where all people, regardless of their skin colour, religious belief, race or creed, can live in peaceful, cooperative harmony. A world where people and not profit comes first. The Respect Party is involved in actually doing practical things in our communities up and down the country. Since joining Respect, I've been involved in getting the council to think again about a waste recycling centre in Lockleaze, which was sited right next to pensioners' housing. I've helped raise £1,000 for trees to be planted in Lockleaze, spoken at the council house to get an initial planning decision overturned where the council wanted to build over some of our green space. And with other members of Respect, that campaign continues over the long-term future of the vision for Lockleaze. And that's just some of the activities in one part of Bristol. There's plenty going on here in Easton too. There are plenty more people in Respect like me who passionately believe another world is possible and are working in all sorts of ways to make it happen. Not bad for someone who considered herself a non-political housewife 2 years ago. In the end, if enough of us believe in peace and harmony and cooperation and act accordingly, the capitalist system, which puts profit before people, must fall to make way for that world which I dream about living in.
Thanks very much.